I'm Chris Farrell from the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, a wacky weekend morning show, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out right now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Int'l podcast. If you're new to the show, welcome. I'm your host, David S. Dawson. I'm a filmmaker in San Diego, California, and I started The Int'l 8 seasons ago because I love exploring the stories of how people who pursue creative endeavors get to where they are. The conversations in each episode are not interviews. We strive for a more casual chat with our guests, and we let the natural flow of conversation run its course as much as we can. This often leads us into surprising territory, not just for you and for me, but often the things we explore surprise even our guests. We often follow up our conversations with our guests on the Clubhouse app. So please join us on Clubhouse. You can visit our club page by visiting us online at intellectualchats.club. And if you need an invite to the app, be sure to check out our Instagram and Twitter accounts at The Intellectual regularly, as we post links to our discussions there with invite codes. If you enjoy this conversation, I hope that you'll subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast player. We're easily found if you search The Intellectual Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Now, let's get on with this week's chat with another amazing creative.
Talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. The Intellectual Podcast starts now.
Hello, intellectual listeners. We are here today with Lisa Lindo, a woman of many hats. How are you doing today, Lisa?
I am trying on all my hats, trying to figure which one I'm going to wear today. But I think today I am a podcast guest.
You are a podcast guest today, but among the many other hats that you wear, let's see, there's producer, actor, NFT creator, manager. You can help me out with this list because I feel like it's pretty extensive.
Okay, so the actor one is kind of funny. I am so not an actor, but a film that I was helping produce and manage a location for once, I walked by in the background, and that became my first IMDb credit. And so when you look me up, it appears that I am actually an actress. Although, truth be told, when Burnham and Murray did The Real World, after the very first Real World, before there were any spinoffs ever, or Kardashians, or any of that, there had only been the Loud family, and then there was the first Real World on MTV. They did a show on NBC called Friends and Lovers, and my ex-husband and I were one of the 5 couples on that series. So, but I'm not an actress. I do not pretend. I am classically trained at UCLA. But there are so many great people that are out there that do it for a profession I would never presume.
All right.
Oh, but you want the other ones. Okay. So yeah. I theatrically booked films in theaters, 94 theaters, 124 theaters. So I've actually helped films get into theaters in the before times. A couple of really important docs and a romantic comedy that was then picked up by Showtime. One of them was Rooted in Peace, the Greg Reitman film where he interviews Deepak Chopra and Donovan and David Lynch and Pete Seeger and Desmond Tutu and the Archbishop and all these amazing people. And that was a really important piece that we went out with about being peaceful on the International Day of Peace. And the other doc is To a More Perfect Union, the Edie Windsor story. And because of her case that went to the Supreme Court, we were able to overturn DOMA, and which led to making gay marriage legal. So I'm very proud of doing that. I've ghostwritten autobiographies, I think, but I think the main thing that I do these days, other than having been known as the CEO of Acme Talent and Literary for a decade, is that I'm a manager. So I manage companies and I manage intellectual properties and authors, award-winning screenwriters and authors. And I'm the vice president of the Milan International Film Festival. I own and run an actual movie theater in the virtual reality space. And I represent artists and graphic artists for their properties to turn them into TV and film projects. And as a result, yes, we have one NFT that dropped and sold for 2 ETH on OpenSea. And if my information is correct, I believe that CryptoPop, who is the person that's dropping our NFTs, is going to be dropping the second one any day on Waka Flocka's new NFT platform, Satoshi.art. So that's kind of exciting. We're supposed to be one of their first 100 artists that they're presenting to the world and covering all the gas fees and the minting fees. So, you never know. It's the Wild West out there with that stuff. So, but I think that that's happening. So that's super, super, super exciting. So that's the second one. And that was, we animate our NFTs and we add music. NFTs we could totally get into, but they're really just transmedia plays for existing IPs. And the existing IP in that case was Canacity, which was a collection of art from different artists around the world of images of fierce females. So the second one has music in it from Paul Riggio, whose company Groove Guild has won a Clio and been nominated for a bunch of other ones. And he's like a synth hip hop music guy that did our music for that. We're really psyched about that. And then the third one, I believe we're going to be doing with Burton L., who does all the visuals for Wu-Tang and Ghostface Killah and Killer Priest whenever they were performing live in the before times. So we're kind of excited about living in the Wu-Tang ecosystem, even just a little bit. So that's the third piece we're going to do. And so I think that is the long version with lots of stuff missing of all the things that I do. I have produced 2 award-winning, best-selling audiobooks in the Battle for Forever series that are narrated by Will Wheaton. So I'm kind of, a go-to person for a bunch of people who are looking to turn their books into audiobooks as well for Audible.
Lisa,
I really do. Yeah. I think that's
it's crazy. Like when you say all of these things that you have done and continue to do in your life, all I can sit here and think is like, how in the hell do you even get started down that road? Which is kind of where I want to start, because you have so many things that you've done. And like, if anyone not that anyone can follow in your footsteps, but where did you grow up? How did this all begin? Give us a journey, because I think the building blocks to getting where you are for even me, like I'm just like, how? So can we start there? Like, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? How did you get involved in this business?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking. I love these origin story questions myself.
That's my favorite part of the podcast.
Yeah. When other people answer them, I'm all like, wow. So I think at the end of the day, all roads lead to Rome, right? There's a million different paths to working in the entertainment industry specifically. But for me, I was going to be a lawyer and I was going to UCLA. I grew up in a lot of places. I lived in Israel. I was there for the 6-Day War. I lived on the Kibbutz Shfaim. I was born in LA. I went to Europe with my mother in the Middle East when I was, right after I was born. She was teaching English to people. And she was teaching English with this thick Brooklyn accent because my parents are from Brooklyn. So I have a little bit of an accent that I do not have any reason for having. And we lived in France and we lived in Greece and we lived in Italy. But, I was really young, right? So really my memories of being a kid are growing up in Beverly Hills and then in Manhattan Beach on the beach. So that's where I went to junior high school and that's where I went to high school. And then I went to UCLA and I was going to be a lawyer. My mother was like, what kind of lifestyle do you want to have? And I told her and she goes, okay, pretty much doctor or lawyer, make up your mind. So, I went to UCLA and there was no like pre-law undergrad thing, right? So I chose a math system science major degree because I was good at math. And I figured, unlike some other degrees, numbers equal numbers, you're going to get an A, like no matter what I would do well, right? You can't it's not like someone could judge your writing and not give you a great grade or something. It's just math. Yeah. So I really, really loved that. And then I did so well, I finished it early. I finished it in like less than 3 years, but I really liked going to UCLA a lot. I was social chairman of my sorority for those years and I kind of really dug it. So I thought I have a choice of like going to Europe for a year after college, like people do before they go to grad, or maybe just taking another major and staying where I'm enjoying myself. So I took a second major of theater for fun. That was my year in Europe, was a theater degree.
That was your gift to yourself, was a theater degree?
That was my gift to myself. And I had never acted in anything and I had never directed anything and I had never costumed anything and I never lit anything and I never built a set. And I learned how to do all of that. I learned how to work a box office. I would drop into any scene that anybody needed for anything, for a directing class, for a student film. I was classically trained. I studied Shakespeare. I can hang a light. I can run sound. I worked on the soap opera at university and designed the logo that I think they still use today. They have a UCLA soap opera. I think it's still going. I don't know. COVID, right? I don't know. But I learned how to, run 3 cameras. I learned how to be an AD. I learned, I really picked up as much as I could. Again, honestly, never thinking I would use it, right? Just for fun.
I love that you did. You're a woman after my own heart. Like, I did that whole path of getting the technical BFA and the acting BFA and then MFA and all of that. So I so appreciate that you studied it just out of the joy of knowledge.
It really was for fun. And there was this, just before I graduated, literally just before I graduated, because I did it the way I did it, I ended up being in a situation where I was going to use every single credit they let you use before you can't take any more classes at UCLA undergrad. There's a max, just so you know.
Okay.
And so first I had to prove that I could take all of the theater classes and that the electives that I had taken while I was a math system science major would cross over. But I also had to prove that to the theater department before they would even accept me. So I got it. And it was a thing. Undergrad at UCLA in 1985 was a thing. It was like a thing. It was a big deal. It was a big deal undergrad department in the United States to go to. So I was competing against people like their whole lives. This was their dream, right? And just before I graduated, I had to take a class and I had to take a language, and the language only allowed me to take the class at this certain time. And I finally got in and I was fitting everything together like a puzzle piece. So you had to take this year of Shakespeare, which I will never regret. It was wonderful. But the professor was brilliant and a hard ass. And in order to take his Shakespeare classes is now the last part of it for the year. You had to take one quarter and then the second quarter. Now I'm in the third quarter. You had to take like a section on the side where you would speak with like a professor, and there'd be like 8 of you in a room, like, chopping it up about Shakespeare. And the time that they gave me was the same time as a French class. So I had to go ask for permission to change it from this hard ass Shakespeare teacher. And I get to his office, and there's a huge line outside. And they're all waiting to ask if they can change their section for whatever reason. It's the beginning of thing. Every other professor just is like, signs off, sure, whatever. He makes it a thing. And one by one, each person comes in and he says the same thing to each one because you can hear it. Oh, you want to be an actor? You think you can change your call time when you're an actor? You think you have the right to just change your audition time when you're an actor? You get an appointment, you show up. That's the lesson here, right? And I get to the front of the line and he gives me the whole lecture. And I go, well, actually, I think I might be a producer. And he goes, oh, okay. Signs the paper. That's it. I'm out. I changed my class. Lesson learned, right? Lesson learned. Not an actress. I'm a producer. So when I graduated again, I was still going to go to law school. I got a job. I had worked undergrad for law firms as a paralegal. So I got a job at arguably one of the largest law firms in the world, Skadden, Arps, Slayton, Meagher, and Flom. I was a beginning litigation paralegal there. They were going to pay for law school. That would have been amazing. However, I also had interviewed at Paramount. And Paramount had Klingons walking around.
Right.
I think Star Trek 4 might have been shooting that. And so I actually took both jobs to start with Whitney. I worked 9 to 5 Monday through Friday at Paramount and 6 to 10 Monday through Friday in the evening at Skadden, and then 10 hours on Saturday and 10 hours on Sunday. I was working 80-hour week.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
But right out of UCLA, it wasn't that big a deal.
You're a hell of a go-getter.
Right? I go get her, and I went and got him.
I don't think much has changed, Lisa. Like, you're always go, go, go.
The thing is at UCLA, I was burning the candle at both ends. Ending the day at 11 o'clock at night was no big deal.
Right.
Working through the weekends, doing stuff on the weekends was no big deal. Right. So why not get paid for it? But while I worked at Paramount, there was a Writers Guild strike. And the lawyer that I worked for, I first worked for one, then I worked for two, oversaw all of the licensing cases where there were issues for anybody that licensed Paramount product, Brady Buncher, like all of the ridiculous, all the Star Trek, content, all the ridiculous shows from their library. They have a huge library of television content. And one by one, these local stations were going bankrupt because of the Writers Guild strike. So because they couldn't have any original content, they couldn't sell commercials, so they couldn't even pay for their licensed content of old shows. And so our office went from overseeing 2 cases to overseeing 300. So I left Skadden and I worked at Paramount full time with overtime, and I loved every minute of it. And I was even in the Christmas chorus at Paramount, the employee Christmas chorus. And I loved it. I loved being on the lot. I loved Klingons in the commissary. I loved the tomato soup in the commissary. Okay. I would take this street that would make me be able to drive straight up to the main gate. So for like 20 blocks, I would see the gate with the Hollywood sign behind it, like the whole thing. I was like, all right, I'm in. And my husband at the time started out as my boyfriend, then became my fiance while I was working at Paramount. It was his dream to be in the entertainment industry. So the last quarter that I was at UCLA, he was producing an independent film that used a lot of student elements. Some people were in school, so they got free access to stuff, but it was really, he put in like $100,000, like it was no joke. It was a real independent film. And he had called me just before I graduated and was like, look, I heard you can cook. I called me out of the blue. And I was wondering if you would do we're looking for an intern for craft service. It was such an arbitrary call. And I'm like, look, dear, I'm casting the lead in something every quarter, so I'm sure I'll have to use up my 2 credits for that. But if I do not get cast in something, I will let you know. And of course, the last quarter I got cast in nothing. So I did that film, and I was an intern for craft service, and I ended up marrying the producer of the film. So now I'm working at Paramount. We're engaged, and I heard you could make more off a lot than on. I don't think you guys realize this origin story would be this long. So I heard about a job at working for Norman Lear, and I went to work for Norman Lear. And Act 3 at the time was the 7th largest theater chain owner in the United States. They were in London and Nashville and Toronto and New York and LA. They were the largest publisher of publications having to do with the entertainment industry, Channels Magazine, etc. I think Adweek was theirs. As I said, he had Act 3 theaters, a theater chain. Of course, we were there for Princess Bride and all the way to Fried Green Tomatoes. And while I was there, we produced the first commercial ever made with Ronald Reagan in it. Also, that actually said the word AIDS, where he said it's okay to hug people. It was after he left the office. So I had this because he's People for the American Way, and it was just an amazing time to be there. But while I was there, Act 3 went from being this huge, massive thing. Norman was like, I think I want to divest myself of all of this. And he sold it all off, and it became Norman Lear, my boss, Marky Pollack, Norman's assistant, and me.
So Lisa, real quick, just because within this origin story, I want to make sure that it's very clear. When you got your job at Paramount, did you meet someone through your schooling that allowed you to get your foot in the door? Or was that just you sent in your resume and they're like, damn, this is stellar, and they hired you? And same with Norman Lear. Did you have...
No, I knew nobody in the industry. I had never worked in the industry. None of my family were in the industry. I mean, I have a cousin who's an actress, who's Ellen Green from Little Shop of Horrors, but that is not someone who could get, no, I knew nobody, but I grew up in LA, right? So the Paramount job was literally just sending my resume to walking it in to the HR office, the employment office that they had, that you could just walk in and find out about open jobs. And legal was my thing, because I'd worked at law firms undergrad because I was going to go to law school, right? So they sat me down, and it was the same question I used to get asked all the time during that time period. Can you work for difficult people? And I'm like, sure. Which I found out later, big mistake. Big, huge. But I'm like, all right, yeah, of course I can. So that's how I got the job at Paramount. For Norman Lear, Marky Pollack, it was the same thing. I was told, can you work for difficult people? There was absolutely nothing difficult about working for Marky Pollack. However, he had worked through some assistants, and there were huge piles of a backlog of stuff not filed. And at that time, he used to say things like, file this under A. Like he would file things under just a letter of A through Z, which is not a way to be able to find anything. So I created a rig filing system and organized us. And I was known for my filing system at Paramount. So blah, blah, blah. That's like the thing that I did. So yeah, knew nobody. You don't need to know anybody to break into the business. You don't need to know anybody. You just need to start submitting your resume to HR departments and interviewing well. So while I worked for Norman Lear, it was an amazing time. But as everyone was like thrown to the wind that worked there other than me, right? One of the people that worked there, Andy Cohen, who's now a really great literary manager out in the world and producer, said, I gave your resume to Triad. You'll thank me later. Like, I don't even know how you got a copy of my resume, right? And I'm like, okay. And for me at that point, agents were the bottom of the food chain. Like, you really didn't talk to agents. Like, ew. Like, seriously, that was my thought process. So I was not really interested. And at Triad, like at most agencies, at the time, they had arguably one of the biggest music departments, which was later, the whole thing was bought by William Morris. I worked for the head of TV packaging, who was also a partner at Triad, Rob Lee. And they had one of the biggest packaging departments before packaging was a dirty word. Movies of the week, with all the big, everybody, right? Everybody huge. So, I interviewed there, and, most kids are coming to the mailroom, right? So this guy didn't want anybody from the mailroom. He wanted someone with experience who could deal with a tremendous amount of traffic coming through, who knew how to deal with celebrities, who knew how to read and do coverage, who could open up his Malibu home, fill it with furniture and throw parties, who could get his Hollywood home ready for events and all of the above, right? So I'm like, all right, but I'm not really interested in this job. So I made him like bid against himself for a while, which became an MO for me, until it was more money than I was making for Norman. And I was like, all right, I'll come. Not a great idea. The assistants and the ecosystem of an agency where everybody's vying to become an agent. Like, my whole thing was, I don't want to be an agent, but I'll do the job for money, right? Mm-hmm. They did not like that at all. They were really not nice to me. I had skipped the mailroom. I had skipped being an outside assistant. And now I'm an inside assistant, running calls, making friends with all the long form television producers and their assistants and their development people. And I'm starting a networking group, and because the people that worked there weren't that nice. So I started getting the attention of the trades for a dinner party that I had every month with the development people that I met over the phone that were really cool, and the people that I worked with at Paramount, and the people that I had worked with at Norman Lear's. And it was called, Fox had just been created, and it was called the Fourth Network. And so we called ourselves the Fifth Network. I actually had a friend that came up with the top 10 lists of names we should name the group. It was like, let's put the cough back in Tartikoff Club. Like, I don't know. It was very, very silly names. It was very, very silly names. And then we ended up with the Fifth Network. And CNN came and covered us a bunch of times. And we were written up on like front page of the Variety that, I was seen as a leader amongst my peers. And I was throwing these sit down dinners every month. You had to say, if you said yes and you didn't come, you weren't invited back. And our credo was, you had to be nice. You had to believe in responsible programming and making a difference in the entertainment industry, but you had to be nice. And as a result, I'm responsible for a bunch of marriages and teenage children now, and or older, and a lot of mergers of companies. Because, when you're in a room full of great people, maybe you want to work with them. So we had more than like 600 members, and I'd rotate the list, and we had a sit-down dinner for between 80 and 100 people every month. And in that time period, during those years that I ran that thing, that entity, the Fifth Network, which there are some people in the world that still remember it, and we did all sorts of things. Like, we supported charities, and we'd had people come in to speak to us from political campaigns, all kinds of stuff. Wherever we had an event, I would make sure the walls were covered with black and white photos from different photographers that I was a fan of to promote their work, and all kinds of extra satellite things that would go along with that. And during that time period, I then went to work for William Morris was about to be bought out by Triad. And I was told, look, you're a woman and there's lots of people ahead of you. You wouldn't be on a path to be an agent. I don't even know if you want to be an agent anyway. Maybe I was advised by some agents that I knew there that were women that were like, you're going to be static. And if anything, you might go down a few rungs when William Morris buys us, right? I got the heads up. So I was offered a job making more money, which was always a reason I would move, working for Susan Smith. And if you don't know who Susan Smith is, just Google it. I will not speak ill of the dead. But let's just say that the person before me said that they needed to move their car on their first day of work and never came back. So this was another one of those situations where someone said, can you work with difficult people? Exactly, right? And I was like, sure, like an idiot. And it was when I was working there that I realized, okay, I want to do something on my own. I think I want to be my own boss. I think I like the entertainment industry. I don't think I'm going to go to law school. I think I'm going to do something myself. Maybe I want to be an agent. Maybe I want my own agency. And Marty Ehrlichman, who's been managing Barbra Streisand, I believe, for her entire career, except for a little blip in the middle, was looking for someone to work with him on the first 8 interactive games ever made anywhere for Sony for this company he created called Entertainment. And so I was brought in interacting with Barbra Streisand. Oh my fucking God, right? Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm answering the phone and I'm speaking to Barbra. What? Oh my God. Right? Oh my God. Like, oh my God. So I we were supposed to make day out of days for these productions, for these make your own games, make your own music videos that we did with InXS and all these bands. And some of the things didn't have a script that was written in like make your own ending kind of way. The script that we were getting was just like someone enters a room 5 different ways, and that was it, right? But you'd actually need to write a script for that if you're going to make a day out of days and shoot something. So I wrote fake scripts to be funny, just to fill in the 5 different ways that someone would enter a room, and they used all my scripts. And so that's another weird IMDb credit I have. But as an agent and as a manager, you don't get credits for what you do. So it was shortly after that, I had told Marty when I went to work for him, I'm going to start my own company. And he's like, yeah, kid, yeah. And within about a year and a half, I started Acme Talent and Literary. And I ran that company for 10 years until we had 18 agents in LA and 3 in New York. William Morris did buy out Triad right then when we were starting. And so it was perfect timing. And a lot of their William Morris's B clients and Triad's B clients that were let go because of the merger would be anybody else's A clients. And that's how we started our client list. And like I said, we had 18 agents in LA before we were done and 3 in New York. So we had a musical theater department. We handled kids and adults. For commercials, our kids department for commercials was amazing. Adults too. We handled people for TV and film. We put Marissa Winokur in Hairspray. We put Seth Meyers on Saturday Night Live. We booked Persia White onto Girlfriends. We had a really good run putting people in film and TV. We put Paul Franklin Dano in his first film after being on Broadway because we would crossover clients, right? And we put him in LIE. I started going to Sundance in 1993, which was when he opened Acme. I went every year. I threw ridiculous late night parties every night of the festival. A lot of people do, but mine kind of got famous. So they started referring to me in the trades. I knew all the IndieWire guys as the Queen of Sundance. So somehow I got that nickname, mostly because I just know where everything is. But, there's so much now to learn about what happens at Sundance. It's grown into this huge, massive, ridiculous thing. When I started going, there were no cell phones. When I started going, it was a very long time ago. People don't quite grasp what was, right? We had pagers and answering machines, and that's how you communicated with each other. So knowing where all the parties were was like a special skill, right, David?
Well, Kevin Smith is a favorite director of mine, and he's always talking about his cell of clerks in Sundance in the early 90s. He's like, I don't know that I'd be able to do that today, because it's a totally different market and it's a totally different way of doing business there. And
yeah, it was just a festival. Now it's a festival and an unofficial market for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I met Vin Diesel when he got there with Strays and became friends and started hanging out with his crowd back then. Like really hanging out with his crowd. And then introduced him, was the first person to go, you really need to know Michelle Rodriguez. I met Michelle Rodriguez at Girl Fight and took her to her first quote unquote Hollywood party, which was my after party at Sundance, right? So, you meet a lot of people at the beginning of their trajectory there. And I'm just a huge fan of independent films and independent voices and the Sundance ecosystem itself and the people that they foster and the stories and the filmmakers that get their start there.
Well,
and it's a
it
big part of me.
To me, like you've managed to work within the system, but you've got an independent kind of personal mentality to begin with. So I think I can see why you would admire the independent filmmakers, the folks who are, grinding it out and making it happen.
Yeah,
that seems to be you,
Yeah, as an agent, I set up ELF. Okay, I developed that with my client, and I set it up. I set up Save the Last Dance, arguably the first interracial dance film that had a sequel, and we set up with the brilliant and wise and wonderful Mickey Freiberg, who came and joined me, who was at William Morrison, came to join me as an agent, as a literary agent, to join my team at Acme Talent and Literary. We went out and got the rights together for the two guys that were taken out of the rubble from the World Trade Center, and we set up World Trade Center with Barry Evans, Deborah Hill, and Oliver Stone that Nicolas Cage starred in. So all the stuff that I actually set up during that time period was studio stuff, like bidding war studio stuff. And those were the ones that got made. The rest of them, my clients made 6 and 7 figures, but due to regime change, it never got made, right? So my experience there was setting up films only with studios, but at the same time, I definitely repped some indie films at Sundance after they were already made by someone else or because a client got into them, right? And then, as I said, I later theatrically booked independent films in the theaters, just in the before times. So I've definitely ridden both rails, right? I've definitely ridden both rails. And I think it's really about storytelling, David, right? At the end of the day, I love storytellers and all the different ways they can tell stories and all the different platforms and technologies that can tell them, from goggle headsets. I represented Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall's featured in these virtual reality films called Wild Immersion that if you guys had ever get your hands on them, you should see them. And they seat like 30 or 40 people at a time in a theater in the before times, and they all watch it on goggles together, and they do these incredible films in the wild of animals interacting with a camera with no crew around, which is incredible. So I don't care what the message is that someone wants to tell. I just kind of dig being part of the process to help them facilitate it being told.
That's awesome. That is totally awesome.
So Lisa,
go ahead. David. No.
Well, so
no, you. No, you. No, you.
We're being so nice. My thought is, so you were running the agency, but you were also producing at the same time.
No. You cannot produce when you're an agent. So what I was setting
there
up
are
those
rules, Whitney.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask this question.
Yeah. As a manager, you can produce. As an agent, you can't. So I set those up as an agent, which is why they're not credits. I represented the writer. I referenced Mickey Freiberg. Mickey was known as the Jewish cowboy. He represented like the Grateful Dead and like Bill Bonanno from the real Godfather family that the Godfather is based on. Like he had these really eclectic, amazing list of clients that he represented. Homer Hickam, all these amazing people. And he used to say, sell it, don't smell it. He was like, something comes your way, you like it, get it out. Let the production companies develop it. Don't work on it in-house before you get it out. And there's that phrase like, perfect is the enemy of the done or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But I like developing. And I think the doors open and then I think they close. So I want things as perfect as they can be, which is why I didn't go out with, even though we were Acme Talent and Literary, I didn't go out with anything for the first year and a half. There was one thing that came my way. I negotiated the deal, but I didn't go out with any scripts for the first year and a half, even though Literary was the name of our agency and I was the lit department. But once I did, it was bidding war, because I knew what I had and I knew what I was developing, and I snuck it to producers ahead of time, and I got notes and we took the notes and we made sure it was as good as possible. So kind of acting like a producer, but I was an agent, right? So when I say I set them up as an agent. David Madden did, Save the Last Dance, right? Other people, Oliver Stone and Deborah Hill made, the World Trade Center. So yeah, I was just the agent of record.
But you were helping shape it in order to get it pitched, to get it through the door.
I helped shape it in order to have it be written the best it could possibly be written in order to get that script to be bought or optioned to be made into a project. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So, and how long did Acme stay in existence before you transitioned to the next level of managing and producing and things like that?
So I was a CEO for 10 years with my husband at the time. My husband stopped being my husband in about 2000 when he found someone lovely that looked a lot like me, but was 10 years younger. He asked her to marry him. Then he asked me for a divorce in that order. Ooh, and then, yeah, it's okay. Everything happens for a reason. And we ran the company for another 3 years together, but it really was difficult. Yeah, because I literally looked exactly like her, and there were now kids, and the kids were coming in the office, and they would see me through the glass conference room and be like, "Mommy," and I'm not mommy, and that did not go over well with my partner and his family. So and then 9/11 happened, and I lost a lot of people because we had a New York office, and by then I was dating the man who ran the vice chair of the stock exchange of the American Stock Exchange's office. So together we lost a lot of people during 9/11. And so we had, some tragedy, and it was difficult. And I kind of lost my, you can tell my heart, right? Like my heart was in it, right? Mm-hmm. My heart was like sewn to the company and everything that we were doing. And my heart broke. And I decided if I was going to keep doing anything, that I was going to do something that I really made a difference. And I decided to get into politics. So I left the business in 2003. Meanwhile, Acme was still thriving. At that point, we were 10 years along as a business. And E did a show about us called Fight for Fame, where 5 actors fought to become a client of the agency every episode. So like we were moving up, but ex-husband basically didn't do a great job of running the company, and it crashed and burned after about 5 years. So Acme lasted about 15 years. He sold off pieces of it. I lasted 10 years. And then from 2003 till 2016, I was doing politics. I was trying to save the world. I started studying it like I was going to get a doctorate in it. I went and lived in Holland for a couple of years. I didn't answer an email or a phone call for 2 years while I studied. Except from family. Like it was kind of crazy being on the treadmill of being an agent of a bicoastal agency to just going, you guys take the United States, I'm taking the rest of the world, right? And then I got a phone call that I should come back to the States, and I did, and I took care of my father who got cancer at the time. He's fine, but he's not fine, but the cancer came and went. Went through one round of chemo and we got over it. And then the UN reached out to me and granted me the ability to go to a leadership conference that was about the millennial goals. And they asked me to attend because they considered me a leader amongst the space. And I started doing politics, and the rest is history. So I worked within the my.barackobama.com website, creating the CAN groups for every county and parish in the United States. They say that website was really instrumental in his winning in 2008. I cannot speak to that. I just worked my ass off. And then I was with him when he won in Chicago. You can he wouldn't be able to pick me out of a lineup. Don't kid yourself. But you can hear me when he gives his speech, his acceptance speech in Chicago. You can hear me on any recording. He says, "Hello, Chicago," and the crowd goes, and before he goes into his speech, like if anybody ever thought a kid from the whatever. In between, you hear one idiot all by herself yelling, "Yes, we can. Yes, we did. Yes, we did." That was me. And so I was there sitting in the front with the Tuskegee Airmen when he was inaugurated. One of my stepfathers was a Tuskegee Airman. I was there at a couple of the balls that he danced at. I worked with lobbyists. I worked on policy. I tried to make the world a better place. I did everything I could. And then in November 2016, can't quite put my finger on what happened November 2016. But I remember maybe I should just drop the word politics and back away slowly. Maybe it's some sort of French word. I don't even understand.
The world took a hard right turn.
Whoa, right? You could say that again, right? And so I exited stage left, and I decided to come back in the industry, the thing that made me my most money at this point in my life. My father had been diagnosed with Parkinson's in about 1990, and it had developed and developed and developed and developed. So by 2017 in January, my dad was quadriplegic, and he still could talk then. And so I turned our dining room. I had moved us up to Oregon, where there's fewer pesticides, which is a thing that hurts people who have Parkinson's. It affects their ability. And I turned the dining room into a big office. My dad, we took the huge glass doors. This house has ceilings that are ridiculous. So he has these huge glass doors on his shower, and I took them off and I turned them into desks. And I created an office off of his ensuite so he could hear me work all the time. He knew I was there. He's still here with us now. I mean, not right here, but in my home.
Yeah.
And both my parents are 83. And, I'm an advocate for him. My father was a rocket scientist his entire career. So my production company is Surgeoun Productions. I gathered up my old clients that I had sold a bunch of stuff for. Edward Savio, one of my oldest friends, one of the smartest people I know, who I met when he was working at Triad, and he had worked at ICM. So he knows the agency side, and he's an author, published author, and a sold screenwriter, an option screenwriter, and been paid a lot of money, and 6 figures and then 7 figures to do it. So we decided to start our company together. I took a couple of his old novellas, put them together, made them into one book, Alexander X, which became a best-selling award-winning audiobook. It was the beginning of the Battle for Forever series. Your listeners should go to battleforforever.com. They should sign up for free. It'll give them a standalone novella in the BFF universe. So if they love it, then they can get the audiobooks later. But it'll drop them into what is going to be a significant franchise that I'm super amazingly excited about. The second book also did really well. They've got great ratings on Audible. I think 4.7 and 4.5 or something. People love them. Great. I mean, Will Wheaton is not inexpensive. He doesn't like a lot of stuff. It's difficult to get him, but we got him. So that's a huge coup. Right after Ready Player One, the film dropped, or right around then, is when we dropped our first 2 audiobooks in June and July of 2019. We're coming up on 400,000 in sales for an audiobook, which is not bad. For the 2 audiobooks. And so we're that's a franchise that's growing. And I go back and forth between LA and New York on a regular basis, representing my literary clients, developing content, and trying to make the world a better place.
And didn't that gentleman just release another book recently?
Edward Savio. So Edward Savio and Edward Willett are 2 different clients. Edward Savio released the first 2 books. And like I said, you could get that novella to drop into the Battle for Forever world at that website, battleforforever.com. But what you can get there is the first chapter read by the author for free of the 3rd book. And I've read 13 chapters of the 3rd book. And the first 2 are great. They're really, 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 really good. This blows them out of the water. I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited about it. It's everything that I would want from a series. And so that's Edward Savio's books. But Edward Willett, I think, is what you might be thinking of. Edward Willett is another client. We can call him Ed for safety's sake. And Ed is a Aurora award-winning author who's represented by the great and powerful Ethan Ellenberg, who also represents I think I want to say Ernest Cline, but I get them all mixed up. So I could be saying the wrong person that he represents. I'll think of it in a minute. Who he represents? Who wrote Ready Player One? When I get Ernest that, Cline. Okay, so I think he represents Ernest Cline, or who wrote Red Shirts? It's Red Shirts. If you get that, then that's who he represents. Anyway, Ed is in great company with this agent, right? He's absolutely brilliant. And so he actually interviewed on a podcast like this, my Edward Savio. As a result, he's like, so you manage writers? What's that about? And he sent me his books and one of his many sets of of series that he has in the sci-fi and fantasy world is the World Shaper series, and I now represent that for film and TV, and we're in development on that. And I think what you're referring to is most of the things that Edward Willett has done have been published by like big, very, very big publishers. But twice he has done a Kickstarter with all the authors that he's interviewed on his podcast that are, international best-selling, award-winning authors. And he's done these anthologies of sci-fi and fantasy books. And the first one was called Shaper of Worlds 1, and I think this is Shaper of Worlds 2. And so Scalzi, John Scalzi.
Yeah, John Scalzi. I was holding back. I was waiting for you to finish.
Yeah, it was Scalzi, not Ernie Klein, Scalzi. So who I want to be John Scalzi when I grow up. So for sure, I want to be John Scalzi when I grow up, like absolutely 100%. So these particular set of books that I'm developing are really amazing. And our biggest problem is it a 3-set film series or is it a TV series? And with these IPs, sometimes you have to develop both and see which one takes first. Whoever bites first is where you actually go. I know that sounds maybe a little counterintuitive, but sometimes it's the way it is. Twilight could have been a streaming series, right? Realistically, right? If you look back at it now, but at the time it made really, really good sense to make 3 features. So we're just trying to figure out what to do with that. But I think you might be referring to his second Kickstarter, which I believe just finished, but we made more than what he wanted to make for the authors. And one of the short stories in there is a story by Edward Savio, just to make it more confusing. So because I know that short story, I know that the second anthology is going to be as good as the first. But I think that might be what you're referring to, Whitney. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what you had sent me. It was about the World Shapers. So
yeah. There you go.
I wanted to ask about that. So Lisa, okay. So one thing that I'm noticing about your story, almost everything that you've tried, you went for it. You just asked the right people and then doors just opened, which is, that's a testament to the fact that, sometimes you just have to freaking go for it and ask. But have you ever run into, any challenges, anything that it was
oh my God, yeah,
derailed the entirety of my trajectory, maybe for good or for bad? Can you talk a little bit about that and how you overcame challenges in your journey?
Well, I spoke a little bit about the challenge of leaving my child, Acme Talent and Literary, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was a challenge to want to even be back in the entertainment industry. I really did a brain dump and never thought I'd be back. There are tons of projects that Edward Savio has set up with Sony and Disney that, it was optioned, right? And an option means that they'll work with you for a significant period of time. They'll give you money up front, in my case, for the clients, right? And they'll pay you for rewrites and they'll pay you for polishes, and then maybe they'll make it or they won't. And then you'll get the rest of the money in the deal at the beginning of principal photography, right? That's generally how it's done. And nothing Edward set up with a studio. In 1 year, 6 figures, 6 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures, all in 1 year, 4 deals, none of them got made. And, one of the things that happens when you work with places like Disney is you might see your idea come out a different way. So we set up a Swiss Family Rubinstein, which he had written with Bette Midler in mind, and Bette Midler's production company took it up when they were at Disney and optioned it. So he got 6 figures for that. Didn't get made there, but within a relatively short period of time on ABC came Beverly Hills Robinson. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? Right? Fight Disney. Right? So that has happened. Okay. We set up the first book that I ever read of Edward Savio, my partner's, was Idiots in the Machine, which is a kind of brilliant dark comedy, mainstream novel. Idiots in the Machine. Really great book. Amazing book. And it was the first thing that I ever read in my life that made me say that while I was working at Triad, maybe I do want to be an agent. I would love to represent something like this. And he was just working at Triad as the ultimate fill-in assistant. He was what they call the 90-day wonder. He would come in, and if someone was looking for an assistant because maybe they lost their older assistant who'd been with them forever, or they've thrown a shoe at assistant number 4 and no one will work on their desk, He would come in, he would work on the desk, clean it up for 90 days, interview a bunch of people, get them trained up, and then get out of the way. So he knew the agency from that side. He was at ICM when some major contracts came through his fingers, where they bought other agencies, when a bunch of agents left and formed their own agency, that kind of thing. So he knew the power of no, and he knew all of that, but he was an author and a screenwriter primarily. And so when I got to Acme Talent Literary, after we'd set up 2 specs of his, Swift Smiley Rubenstein, The Master, and then the third one was a pitch, which we set up with Sony, called Book 'Em, which was about a guy who came from a long line of cops and detectives. This was before Paul Blart Mall Cop. It was before Night in the Museum. Okay, neither one of those things was a twinkle in anybody's eye. And our story was like, this guy's just kind of incompetent. He's not very good at any of the police tests or anything. And so his brother in the system, in the police officer's ecosystem, gets him the only job he can get him, working for the Boston Library System as a book detective, tracking down deadbeat book borrowers. And it was called Book 'Em. And he ends up in the process, obviously, solving a real live kidnapping case, right? Really, really brilliant. We had set that up. And because they'd already paid Edward 6 figures for a pitch with Sony, when we went out with that manuscript, Idiots in the Machine, an unpublished manuscript at that point, Wendy Feinerman and her husband at the time, Mark, who ran the studio, bid against themselves for hours. I think their original offer was $70,000 and it went up. They ended up at 1.2 million. Is what it was done for. Did any of those things get made that year? Not a one. Did we make all the upfront money? Was he very busy doing rewrites on everything? Sure. That was part of the deal, right? So that was great, but they didn't always get made. So I think the challenge is once your project gets into the hands of a system that you are no longer in charge of. Like I had this screenwriter who wrote, Town and Country, this spec called Town and Country. And it went around and everybody really liked it. It was really kind of friggin' brilliant. A lot of times when you read screenplays, there's things that are there for the screen and there's things that are there for the reader. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you don't want to overdo it in your scene descriptions, but when you're trying to get into the hands of producers or you want to get past the gatekeepers of the readers that read things for all these agencies and these producers and development executives, sometimes you got to put really interesting things in the scene descriptions.
See, now that's really interesting because we're told constantly to avoid that in our screenwriting. But I've always felt that way. Like, at least while I'm trying to sell it, some of that scene description needs to be in there. Like,
right. So here's
I felt that absolutely in my gut for a long time, but I'm always told not to do that.
Yeah, exactly. By people who are, I can't use the word on okay, but your gut is correct and they're right. Right. The great thing about Clubhouse, where we all met, is that you could triangulate information and solutions and everybody can be right? Which is really just amazing. So you don't do like the camera pan, and you don't give too much information that would really be part of like a shooting script. But I'm probably going to butcher this, but it was something like, we see a car from above tooling down the highway, making his way out to Hamptons through Long Island, lighting up a cigarette, wearing a suit that had once walked Wall Street, but had long since forgotten the address. I'm butchering it, but it's intriguing. You get that this was actually about the time when the stock market crashed, right? The original stock market crash back in the turn of to 20s, 30s, and it's supposed to be the backstory of the stock market crashing and it being something that was calculated and manipulated.
Right, but that piece of writing not only paints a picture but taps into an emotional vein. Everything.
Is any of that on screen? Maybe, maybe not. but it definitely spoke to the people reading the script. You get that this guy's like wearing a rumpled suit, like he looked like he was important. He's not anymore. He's headed out to the Hamptons. If you ever spend any time in New York, that's kind of an escape moment, right? He's actually being invited to this dinner with all these big wigs and he doesn't know why. So that guy, we went out with a script. No one bought it or optioned it, but they did want to know him. And he went out to a million meetings. He was super fascinating, that guy. And what happened was he wanted to develop a screenplay based on a Philip K. Dick short story.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And Philip K. Dick is, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And, right? Like some of the most classic films of all time.
God. Yeah.
Right. Sci-fi God became, Blade Runner and became, what's the Schwarzenegger? Mars?
Total Recall.
Total Recall. Thank you. Happens on Mars. Total Recall. Right. So these are developed from those short stories. So it was no joke. And we contacted them and found that they wanted like $100K. The estate for this short story. I don't have $100K. I'm an agent. I didn't know what to do, but Sony was really interested in him. So we went to Sony and we're like, look, Sony, this is answering your question about overcoming. We went to Sony and we're like, look, you like him as a screenwriter. He wants to develop this. Here's the short story. It would cost $100,000. They're like, no problem. We'll pay the $100,000 and we'll hire him to write the screenplay. That means they now owned the rights to that short story.
Right.
And when it didn't move forward, my screenwriter had nothing. And it meant that he was writing the screenplay as essentially a work for hire for the studio.
Right.
So he didn't own that screenplay, which was called Time Squared afterwards. And so when it was done, you got nothing. And so I think in terms of obstacles to overcome, knowing that when you put yourself in the hands of one of these giants, it's both a blessing and a curse, right? These things, if they don't happen, you're stuck. It may go into turnaround. It may not go into turnaround. If it goes into turnaround, you've got to find someone else who wants to replace all the money that's already been spent at a studio level in order to even play before they go from there, right? So I think those are some of the biggest obstacles to overcome. And then coming back into the entertainment industry, getting everybody to know that I was alive, because there were a lot of people that followed me and in the news industry as a journalist in politics. And there are people who got their news only from me. I run an activist Democrats group in Facebook with a couple 100,000 people, and a group called News that used to have like 50,000 members. And then it went down to 30,000 members. And now it's down to 17,000 members, partly because of the whole like fake news, like whatever, partly because it was a bunch of trolls in there that got removed, partly because I went to Clubhouse and kind of stopped doing it because I got throttled on Facebook, which is a whole other interesting political story. But I started getting throttled right around just before the 2020 election for 30 days for no reason. I couldn't find anything in my inbox. And then I was throttled for another 30 days around the night before the insurrection. So just kind of odd stuff. But a lot of people got their news from me. But entertainment industry, everyone I knew is either dead or now the head of something. Like that's how time passed, right? In those 13 years. Like, so for me, the struggle was, how do I get everybody to know that I'm back and playing in a world where the streamers are now the kings, right?
Yeah.
And when I left the industry, 60 people would send a messenger on a Tuesday or a Wednesday to pick up a physical script for me, right? And Craig Perry would come and sit on my couch the night before that happened so that he could read the script before anybody else got it, right? And now you send emails and you may or may not get a response. I mean, it's just a whole different universe, right? And actors, when I left the business, pictures were submitted as pictures and resumes, and you had a room full of pictures and resumes. Now it's all Actors Access and it's online, and it's, the world changed. The world changed significantly in the time that I was gone. So those are the challenges for me. But then I got on Clubhouse and everyone was like, oh, Lisa's back. So, but the truth is, Edward and I talk about it all the time, my partner, if all we did was work on his books one by one and make them into audiobooks, I'm making money every month. I'm a happy person. We're creating content. We're speaking to an audience. The fact that we're going to do audio plays of some of his screenplays for Audible, the fact that I have all these other projects that are now, set up in development with different big, showrunners and co-executive producers and people that can get things done with their production companies around town is just gravy. Right. I'm just grateful that I can be working on content that I'm excited about, that I get to read great stuff every day. There's this incredible company called Shadow Alley Press. They're a publishing firm that has a lot of titles, and they've approached me about managing their entire library, and we're having discussions. So we'll see if that really happens. Maybe I could be Vince Gerardis when I grow up, that would be nice too. I'd be okay with that. So in the next couple of days before we talk next, I have to listen to 2 audiobooks. That's a lot of time consumption right there, just so I can start to get familiar with their library of their amazing work and the author that runs that company at Shadow Alley Press, which is all like sci-fi and fantasy titles. It's not all I do, but if I have a choice, my dogs are named after Star Trek characters. You know what I mean? Like, I'm kind of a geek. As I mentioned, the aforementioned Klingons at Paramount, right? I've definitely dropped some hints that I like Star Trek. So, if I have a choice, I think that's the genre that I love, but I've definitely worked on everything.
That's amazing.
Lisa, I so love that within this story, like, you often say when I grow up, and I think that speaks to the fact that you still are viewing this entire journey with a child's eye, where it's like, you know what, nothing's impossible, and I'm just going to get out there and do it, and I can change my career midstream or go back, and like that's so exciting. How
it's hard though, sweetie. It's hard. It's no joke. Like, it's no joke. Like, yeah, you're right. I kick doors open for a living. But what is standing there once the door is kicked open is the biggest part of the journey. And Edward Savvy, my partner, calls me an unguided missile, because if he says he wants something, I get it in a few minutes. Like, be very careful what you ask me for, because I know 5 people who can get you that, right? But if you open that door and the person isn't ready, not only does the door close, but people are like done with them. They're literally done with them. Right. I had someone come to me with a really great idea, and I started working with them, and they called me Linda by accident 4 times, and the door closed. I don't like being called Linda.
Well,
I mean, it wasn't the only reason, but I'm just saying, doors open and doors close.
Right.
And you have to really, really, really be ready when they open to be the best that you can be. Like you said, David, you know what I mean? Like, you do that, you do what I call the getting readies, right? And a lot of people will tell you the way you're getting ready might be wrong. But you really, in order to be successful, I think you have to trust your gut on what really feels organic to how you're telling your story. And it doesn't matter how many times people say no, Whitney. You only need one right yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of actors on Clubhouse recently, ask me, they're like, I'm not getting a lot of auditions, and the lull times, I don't know what to do with myself during the lull times. Do I need to study more? Do I need to do more self-tapes and whatever? And I keep telling all of them the same thing. I'm like, go live your life during the lull time. Remember what it's like to be a human being, because ultimately that's important. Don't be afraid to be a person.
Well, here's my thing, because I represented thousands of actors over the years, right? Like, literally. So here's what I would say to that. First of all, living your life and getting hurt informs a lot of performances as an actor. So
exactly what I said to them.
Yeah. But I don't understand actors having downtime. I don't even understand what those words mean, because if you're not, any actor who says, should I be studying? I don't understand who they are. Like, you should, it's ABS. Always be studying. It would be like someone who's a musician going, do you think I should practice my playing? Do you think I should go on a piano every once in a while? Do you think I should pick up a guitar? Yes, you moron, of course. Like, if you're an actor and you're not studying, now here's what I say about that. if you've been studying with the same person for over a year, and there may be some acting coaches out there who will be very upset with me saying this, but I've always said it. If you're studying with the same person for over a year and you've hit like that comfortable place, I have one actor explain to me, at first you're the new person in the class, and then the next thing you know, they're pairing you up with new people, right? Like to help them along as you grow within a class space, within a classroom space.
Right.
But if you're not always studying, you're not working out your instrument, right? And if you're with the same person for over a year, you came in at this level. I'm making a hand gesture you can't see. You came in at this level, right? And then after a year, you grew to this level. But acting coaches are humans. They've now made you better, right? That they're not necessarily, you kind of plateau. And so I always recommend going with somebody else for a while, because then you come in at that higher level, but to them, it's your beginning spot. Right. And they have no place to go but up from there. So you have a place to learn and grow, and you don't get complacent. You could always go back to that original coach. You could always study with them specifically for an audition. But I think that especially the most amazing thing, some amazing things have happened because of COVID.
Yeah.
Horrible things. Loss and fear and we lost about a third of our film festivals this last year because either people died or they lost their venues, or just the fear itself has stifled people. And we've had to our business specifically has had to relearn how to do what we do safely. And we're still in that process. Insurance doesn't know what to do about us. Getting people from country to country to move around for a production is really difficult. So, there's a lot of obstacles we need to overcome to stay, in the entertainment business. But if you are an actor and you're not constantly studying and taking advantage of the fact that you can reach out and study with people you could never study with before,
right?
Because it's virtual, exactly. Then what the hell are you doing?
Yeah,
well,
you should be. Yeah.
There's something to be said of like studying different pedagogies of acting as well, because not everything requires a hammer.
Yep.
Maybe it's Meisner at one point, and maybe it's Meyerhold technique at another point, depending on.
Or maybe you're doing
character.
the method, right? Or maybe, or you're taking, if it wasn't for COVID, and even if it is because you can do things virtually, are you taking movement classes? Are you taking voice classes? Are you building your wardrobe of things you would want to wear for auditions? Are you physically taking care of yourself? People have things to say about Scientology, but I will say that the Beverly Hills Playhouse has come up with some of the best actors I've ever represented. And one of their theories is, clean your car, clean your mind, basically something like that. And so the people that they get that come through there are on their game. Their shit is together. They are physically working on themselves. They've got themselves in either the best shape possible, or they've cultivated the character part of them so that they've got it on point. They're on fleek. They have the best possible photos. You're always doing new shoots. There's so much you could be doing. You could be learning other dialects. You could be learning to sing. You could be learning a skill that you could use on a set. You could be learning martial arts. You could be there are so many things.
That's what I think I meant by you got to remember to be a person. you gotta live, because what I've seen with a lot of people during COVID is they kind of got stuck on Zoom all day, and they're rehearsing with people on Zoom, or they're taking classes with people on Zoom, or they're just stuck in a room, and they're forgetting that they've got to go out and do other things like yoga and hiking and camping and exploring the world and remembering what the world is like. I have this fear that we're going to have a generation of actors that only know how to act in a bedroom,
Yeah, with a green screen behind them. Yeah, no, you're so right, David. And one of the things I studied, to bring it back to the Shakespeare professor that I had in college, one of the themes that ran through everything was something called the green world theme, which is also something that Robert Redford really believes in when he created Sundance and the Sundance Institute, which was basically, if you look at the Shakespeare stories that are not the historical pieces, they all have this theme of something isn't working out well. There's some sort of conflict. You go into the woods or you get caught up in nature somehow and you figure it all out and everything goes to hell and then gets reassigned. And then you come back to the city and everything is all's well that ends well. Right. Mm-hmm. And, Robert Redford did the same thing. He said, if I can get maybe actors or people who've worked in one field, one area of the business out into the woods, out into nature, I bet they can learn to tell stories. And you've got all these actors, and some people, they're just actors, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but that's who they are. But now they have this opportunity to create content like never before. They can not only reach out to other content creators easier than ever in the history of the entertainment industry, but they can also pick up a phone and make an iPhone film like Tangerine that ends up at Sundance, right? They have access to creating content, and platforms that can show their content that reach audiences that never existed before. So, what Robert believed was that if you get like an actor to come out there, they could maybe direct their first film. They could come up with ideas because they're in the woods. Like, so when you casually say like, go camping or go for a walk, like it actually, there's been a longstanding belief within some of the giants of our industry over the millennia that exposing yourself to nature is the most amazing reset. In fact, when you're Jewish and you believe in the Kabbalah or the Kabbalah, however you say it, one of the things you're supposed to do is on Saturdays when you're supposed to unplug, right? Or I guess Sundays for the Christians or Saturdays for the Seventh-day Adventists, that you are supposed to unplug and go for a walk with your family in nature. It is something that as humans, we're supposed to do. There's so many different teachings that teach you're supposed to do that because there's some kind of reset that happens that we don't even understand on a quantum level.
Yeah. It's akin to meditation. You're like actually listening to, you're connecting back to what's within instead of all this shit that's without.
Right. And we're three parts. There's three parts to us when you meditate, right? There's you, there's your brain, and there's your body, and you're three different parts. And you can tell your brain what to do, and you can tell your body what to do. And you can march out certain illness in your body by doing that. And you can, I'm a firm believer in Western medicine. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying there's lots of people who've been healed from certain things because they know that they can tell their body what to do. They know they can control pain messages hitting their brain. They know that, when you go to sleep at night, if you find that you are sending yourself a lot of negative messages, this is an overcoming story as well, right? So let's say you find that out loud or whatever, you are constantly saying, that's not something I can do. Or I keep getting robbed. Or some list of negative phrases that are really true for you, right? I can't get past a callback, right? I can't, whatever. It's a negative phrase that's true for you. If you can make a list of those negative phrases and create a list of the opposite of that. So instead of I'm always getting robbed by bad people, it's I'm surrounded by kind, generous, honest, and loving people. I'm surrounded by kind, generous, honest, and loving people. And you create that as a mantra and you repeat that over and over before you go to sleep. You are programming your brain, and then you're setting your brain so that tomorrow, the day after that, they're going to look for all of those good things in your life and steer you away from the bad ones because you programmed it to do that. And a lot of people that hit walls, and it's a numbers game. If you get called back all the time, it's just a matter of time. But when you're trying to make it from I'm almost there to I'm there or to success, but the biggest thing you can do is check yourself. Are you constantly sending yourself negative mantra messages and programming yourself to believe that that is your existence on this earth and in this universe? Or are you taking a moment, choosing the opposite of those statements carefully, and repeating those to yourself over and over and over, especially before you go to sleep, because it will put you to sleep, but your brain will keep playing it to yourself. You can record it over and over in a loop and play it to yourself over and over. Our bodies are so Pavlovian. Like when you meditate and you listen to the sound of water running, for instance, actual water running gives off negative ions, which puts you in a really positive frame of mind. It's just the way it is. But when we listen to running water, even though we're not near the rushing water, it has the same effect.
Right.
So
a physical response to the stimuli.
Exactly. So give yourself the right stimuli that can help you have the physical response you need to have to grow and overcome obstacles.
Yeah.
I love that. That's very nice, Lisa.
Anytime, baby.
That's beautiful. Lisa, thank you so much for giving us the time and telling us your story. Like, I think you're just an incredible woman and certainly an inspiration for a lot of people. And I can't wait to get this episode out and have people hear it.
Right? It's so positive, and like everybody's gonna be like, "Yes, gonna go conquer the world now." That's the vibe you give off, Lisa. It's like, wow, she can do it. I can do it. Let's all go conquer the world.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would leave you with is everybody has trials and tribulations you can't see on the surface. Yeah. So try to be kind. When someone does something out of character and it doesn't make sense and it's hurtful, just maybe give them a little space, because we've all been through it in 2020. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And if we all help each other just a little bit, I think a rising tide will lift all boats.
That has been my mantra since January 1 this year. Be kind. Yep.
Well, I think that's a lovely sentiment to leave off on. Thank you guys so much for being here and having this chat. And thank you, listeners, for listening. And we'll see you next time, guys.
Hello there, citizens. I am the terror that flaps in the night. I am the floaty that will not flush no matter how many times you try in the toilet bowl of crime. I am Darkwing Duck, telling you please, talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. Whatever the heck that means. After all, you are watching Intellectual Podcast with your ears.
I love being intellectual.